Good morning, everyone. We're going to get going with our second talk of the morning, and I'm delighted to welcome Dave Glennon. Dave's the Group Head of Digital Engineering at Mace and brings to us over 25 years of experience in the construction industry and has overseen the rollout and implementation of technology across multiple practices. At Mace, Dave is responsible for driving the business's digital agenda, as well as enabling the adoption of new technologies to boost value for their clients. Today he's going to talk to us about redefining the boundaries of ambition through the Mace Innovation Strategy, and we'll explain their response to some of the challenges of an exponential change in the industry, addressing the climate emergency and skills and labour availability. I think. Over to you, Dave.
That's great. Thank you for that introduction, although it is sobering when I have been in the industry for 25 years. Yes, that's disappointing to hear. But thank you for the introduction. I'm David Glennon. 25 years ago, I started off as a construction manager. I was working with Bovis. I was a contractor. Did that for sort of 10, 15 years. Moved out of construction management and started to do some change management roles, which was good. Got to understand how to make a change in a construction industry. And then following that, joined some consultancies because I wanted to see that side of the world. So I worked for the likes of, it was URS that turned into AECOM and Arcadis, all in the digital space. And then more recently, had 4 years out in Saudi Arabia as the client for Red Sea Global. I've been back in the UK now 8 months. I've been with Mace 7 months, and it's the first time talking about Mace. So thank you very much to the AV man who managed to save me when my presentation wasn't working this morning on the USB stick. So hugely appreciate that. So this is what I'm going to take you through. I'm going to talk a little bit about Mace, and that's not intended as an advert. That's to provide some context as to why innovation is important and then how the governance fits in. Talk a bit about the innovation history, so the things that we've done over the years and how that's grown. We've had a new innovation strategy come out. I'll be able to take you through how we're making that work within Mace, that the governance that's in place, and then start to take you through some of the successes that we've had. So a little bit about Mace. So I'll talk about our purpose. So the first one, I think it's a fairly bold statement, to redefine the boundaries of ambition. But I think it's an important statement because it really starts to frame the need for innovation, and that's not just for the organisation, but then also for the individuals within it. And it sort of goes through the sort of DNA of the organisation. So it's important culturally that everyone knows that they've got the permission to innovate and to work with our clients and find the more innovative solutions to their challenges. And if you get a chance, I'd recommend having a look at the website. Everything about our strategy is there. You can go click on it and it will take you through many of the things I'm about to introduce you to, but then also links you into the innovation strategy. Lots of detail in there. But it's our priorities. We've got 3 priorities, and they're the one that sets the innovation agenda. The first one, to pursue a sustainable world, is a key driver for the organisation because it's the right thing to do, but it also aligns with the key drivers of many of our clients. And it's our responsible business team that really helps guide us on that and works with clients to help guide them on that same challenge. And this slide here starts to show some of our KPIs. So this is how we're measuring ourselves. And the reason why that's important is it gives us something to aim at. So again, when we start to look at our innovation strategy and the things that we're trying to achieve, if it's not starting to hit these KPIs, then you've got to think, is this really the type of thing that we want to invest our time in? So some great examples here around reducing the corporate carbon by 10% annually, working with our clients to reduce their use of carbon, and then increasing the biodiversity that's being delivered. So the first one's pursuing a sustainable world. The second one's more around growing together. And again, you can see that we've got some KPIs here, some measures, some metrics that flow down from the strategy through into my objectives, my team's objectives. So again, you can see it's not just what we do going to work every day to go deliver assets, it's to go hit these KPIs, and again, how it links to our innovation strategy. And then the final one, this is probably particularly close to my heart as head of digital, delivering distinctive value, and very much around good days at work. How do we improve or increase our client satisfaction? But then some really tangible ones around annual margin growth, and is clearly called out there our R&D investment by 2026, and I'll describe how we manage that and how we grow that shortly. But it all ties into our sustainability goals, our ESG framework. So again, just sort of reinforces KPIs with real numbers that we're all measured against. So we have to find ways to deliver those, and we're not going to achieve that through traditional ways of working. So hopefully, you get that what I'm trying to do is set the scene as to why innovation is important. I'll now spend a couple of minutes talking about Mace. So I'll describe some things that I didn't know about before I joined, but again, we'll start to provide context for why our innovation strategy is the way it is and why it's so important. So a bit about our culture. So on the left, you can see why we exist, our purpose that I've described, and our priorities. But then we step into the values. So it's around safety, creating opportunity, client focus, and integrity, and the services that we provide. So it sort of sits on two sides, and you'll see why this is important in a moment. One part of our organisation is around consultancy, that's our consult engine, and then the other half is around construct. So you can see one's providing advice to clients, and the construct side is all about pure delivery. It's quite interesting. Our office is in Moorgate, in town, and the majority of our work seems to be within about 20 minutes walk of there. So it's great if you really enjoy construction and you're like me in an office role. I can quickly get round to many of the sites and see what our innovation is doing in practice. And here's the markets that we work in. You can see the UK is a particular focus for us, but the Middle East and Africa is growing rapidly. This innovation strategy goes across all of those. So we're starting to see some pretty exciting pieces of work, especially coming out of the Middle East, where they have some particular challenges around, getting the right skills, getting the right labour, just capacity within the market. We're having to find different ways of working. So it's how do we pull that knowledge and experience from London into the Middle East and then back the other way. And then a little bit about our performance. So there's the two engines. We've got the consult engine. That's the one that's rapidly growing at the moment. And the construct engine is probably the one that we're most famous for. And then here are some of the achievements of how we're stacking up to those priorities and those KPIs. So over the last couple of years, we're continuously on the right direction to achieve those targets. So that's the reason for taking you through that's sort of setting the scene, and I'm hopefully in sort of 2-3 minutes there or 5 minutes, you've got to sort of understand the why. Does that make sense? You can sort of see why innovation is important to Mace? Okay, very good. So now we'll start to look at the how, and I'll take you through some of the history. So back in 2017 was the first innovation strategy at Mace, and it was around 4 key themes. So the first one around digital technology. Second one around assembly. So this is where we're starting to introduce the idea of modern methods of construction, offsite prefab, all the things that we're seeing now. Operate was key. It was a key business unit within Mace that was sold at the end of last year. But the thought and the thinking that goes behind it is still relevant. We're working with our clients every day to help them understand what's going on in the operate space. How do they get better outcomes from the assets that they've created? And then finally around lean and continuous improvement. So if we take, we'll take those 4 themes. I'll show you how they've grown over time. We've got a number of innovation multipliers. So if we look at the type of work that we do, so obviously we're involved in the design process. We then plan our work and then go deliver that work. The innovation themes were then seen as multipliers for the work that we do. So you can see the heavy use of digital technology, how that then informs and helps with offsite manufacture. The integrated logistics, so that's one of there's a couple of areas that we sort of self-deliver in. So as in the construct world, we're a tier 1 contractor, but most of our work is delivered through our supply chain. But logistics is an area where we're hands-on, we do that ourselves, and the MEP side as well. So that was an area where we could really get in and make a difference to our projects, but then also embed some of our innovation into our delivery. We then move on to assembly and then operate. So I'll take you through the journey from why innovation became important and how the first innovation, and I'll talk about the more recent one, how that accelerated our innovation journey. So there's a number of projects here, so we'll talk a bit about the shards, we'll talk a bit about the jump factory. We've got a video to show you there. Mace Tech is where we then span off a separate business around the innovative ways of working that came from the jump factory. Then it starts to get a little bit more digital as we talk about the kits and parts at the forge, and then the heavy focus on reducing carbon, example there at Palmerston Court, and then some of the robotics that we have. So very early on, in order to deliver the shards, super complex projects, very compressed timelines. Again, we had control of the MEP delivery ourselves. So this is one of the first steps into prefabrication and off-site assembly to go deliver that. And it was I'm sure if you delivered it, you wouldn't say it was simple, but it's a fairly simple concept around using modular plant rooms and the equipment that goes within that, and then how do we get that through the building in the risers. A lot of thought went into how do we assemble that not at the workplace but somewhere else, and then get them to the project, and then the components that are used within that. So that's really where a lot of the initial thinking around how do we bring innovative ways of working to our project sites. What I'm going to go on to next is an example of the rising factory. It's a bit long, it's a couple of minutes, but what I think it does show is how but this is reality, is how we've turned a process that might take 2 or more months to go up a floor into something that was achievable within a week. And if you enjoy construction, like I do, you'll enjoy it. But it is a couple of minutes, but it's all about how we created a sort of factory-like environment on a live construction project. There we go. One thing I will point out, if you look to the top left, you can see how the hours are moving. So this is all at the top of a building. You can see the way it's encased is covered, so the feeling is that it's a controlled environment. It's trying to replicate a factory type environment on a live construction project. So yeah, so apologies, it's a bit of a long video, but what I do like about it though is, well, one of the things I do like is when they move the factory up, it looks like the floor dropped, but that's not, that's the structure moving up. But you can see a lot of work then has to go into the pre-construction phase. You're spending a lot of time planning it out and making sure that you've got all the right parts in the right place before you start construction. It can be, concerning. People want to see progress straight away. But it was a useful exercise to go spend the time, go prove the concept, and then deliver in a much faster time. I think one of the things that is disappointing, always hurts me when you see the wet concrete getting applied at the end. You think, well, that's so it's a real shame to see that. But I'll show you what we've done around that shortly. But digital was one of the key elements as this. So part of that was creating the kit apart, so having to work out exactly what all the different parts are and how they go together. And then how we could then bring that then to assembly it off-site, and I'll start to show you some of the other areas that we've started to work on. But here's an example of the infrastructure that's required in order to do that. That's the yard where I'll be able to show you the path of materials moving through that in a moment. But it's not just the concrete that we're doing it for in the MEP. We're now starting to, for some time, if you're particularly interested in facades. So we've been doing the same with facades and starting to understand what that looks like in assembly. If you get a chance on the way home, if you go to London Bridge, stand underneath the Shard, you'll be able to see this in action at the moment on one of our projects there. It was great. I was there not yesterday, the day before, and as a bit of a geek, stood there for 20 minutes watching all these panels go in and get erected. But there's there's lots of areas where we've been able to use this way of working. I'll move on to this bit, the tracking and logistics. So you can see it's pretty hard to see here, but what we can do is track the path of one of these units as they make their way through the manufacturing assembly process. So here is where everything is cast, everything is then tagged, so we can see when it's created. We can also sort of see how that's working during the design process, but when we get to the physical world, once it's cast, we're able to start to track it. It then goes into the Mace Tech supermarket, so that's where all the materials are, and then as they then get assembled, again, we keep on seeing where scanning the tag to understand where they are in the process, till eventually get lifted onto the lorry so we know where they are. We can then track that through till it gets to site. Very important, especially in London with congested projects. Just-in-time delivery is super important. We've got to make sure that the hook is there ready to go, so we can get just-in-time delivery going. We can see as it lands up onto the building and see where it gets installed. We can then also use that then to sort of see when it's been tested and we're happy with it. So yeah, we've got full transparency of where we are in the process. So that was an example of the jump factory. We then moved on from that and had a second iteration of it. And I won't play the full video of this, but what we're able to do was to start to understand from the first one where the areas for opportunity were. So it was just some of the simple things around logistics, how we were moving materials, how we were moving people around that space. We're able to start to find further improvements. So that's an example of sort of seeing how what the floor plan was like, but this sort of shows you the types of improvements that we've been getting over a traditional build. I'll just leave that there for one moment. There's a few things to call out. So if you start to look at just the number of resources for us, that's super helpful. It means that we can have smaller canteens. We can it's easier to manage logistics. So it starts to become more productive. The productivity of the GVA, that's how we manage our productivity within Mace. You can see like a massive increase there, but it was a lot of things just around some certainty. That was for us and the client around programming cost, some huge benefits. The next iteration was the Forge. And this is where we've been sort of more focused on the digital aspect. You can see there on the picture the sort of kit of parts. So we're now able to sort of get down a few levels of detail and start to assemble, create the sub-assemblies that will then become the things that we take to site. And the big focus at the moment has been around carbon. So this is the example at Palmerston Court where we're creating these low carbon cassettes. They're getting delivered to site. So lower carbon, less people on site, safer to deliver, quicker. Plenty of benefits there. And for those that really enjoy facades, an example here of the mega panel where we're able to get all the different components, bring them together, and then lift them as one, which you saw in the previous video. So they were some of the things that were born out of the first innovation strategy. I'll now take us through where we are now. So this is the Innovation Strategy version 2. It's called Speed and Scale. That was launched in 2022. Again, if you go to our website, there's pages and pages of it there. It's very open. We're encourage everyone, supply chain members, to come and work with us on that. But to describe it, there's three sort of focus areas, three innovation areas. Construction to production, that's a lot of what you've just been seeing there around modern methods of construction, net zero carbon, and digital and data. So they're the things that we're looking for. To explain a little bit more, if you look down the bottom, we've got the innovation funds. So if you remember I said we've got the 3.5% R&D fund target. So I'll explain how we manage that in a moment. And the strategic priorities are the four that I mentioned before. It then goes into the innovation engine, so concept, investigate, develop and embed. You'll see why that's important in a moment, and then the expected outcomes. I'll skip this slide. All of them are available on our website, and the graphics are much better. You can download them. I won't talk through this one because, again, I think the graphics are better. So these are the three themes that have come out of the innovation strategy. So one's around connected production, one around connected sites, and then connected buildings and workplaces. And it's bringing those together that we're starting to see the data-driven built environment, and then that's how we get the outcomes that we're looking at the top. So carbon reduction, waste reduction, improved cost certainty, improved program. So the first one I'll talk is around connected production. So up on the top left, we'll see the design catalogue. That's where we've been working with our supply chain to understand the components that are there and that are available. And we use those in the design phase with our design configuration tool. So we can then bring those components together to go create the building during the design phase. Then working with the supply chain, we can then start to create those components, hopefully standardised components, and start to create those sort of sub-assemblies. The bit then where it all starts to come together, if we can pre-assemble those, so some of it you might see, for example, in that jump factory where we're able to get those whole pieces brought to site straight away, or sometimes we may have to find a location closer to the project and do some of the assembly there so that they can be brought to site and then lifted onto the project, as you see in the assembly phase, and then finally we hand it over for the client to operate. So that's what the connected production piece looks like, and that's effectively what I was showing you in some of the slides that we saw before. Connected site, this is where a lot of it all comes together. So on the top left, you'll see where it says design and pre-construction. That's more like your typical BIM space. So we've got our common data environment, and we've got lots of different data sources coming into that, and we're using that to make better decisions, better informed decisions. So the examples that you'll see there around estimating, so we've got automated estimation now, model management, embodied carbon assessment, we've got some calculators around that now, and then ensuring the quality of our design is there. On the bottom left, it's called the project office. So we do 4D scheduling, often very early on in the project, very useful in pre-construction. But the other graphic that you can see there is around the control centre. That's becoming very popular now. We've got a room that'll have a number of screens on it. It could be often used for the sort of monthly project review. There'll be dashboards up on all the walls, and everyone can go and interrogate what's going on. I'm seeing the meetings that I enjoy more is when we're in there with often members of the supply chain. We're able to get real data and get everyone working on collaboratively to go find a solution. And we've got a number of tools that will help us do that. On the project site, many of these I'm sure you'll be well aware of. So delivery management systems, QA, QC, weekly monitoring, laser scanning. So again, these are the types of things that we wanted to see come through the innovation strategy, and then how do we integrate that with supply chain. And then the final one is around the operate side. So we used to have the operate business. So that was, how can we get a better workplace and get better data from the asset as it's in operation. Even though the Operate business isn't part of Mace anymore, this is still valuable information for our clients, so we have an offering there, but it's about how do we embed the technology into the asset, how do we improve the customer experience, how do we get better outcomes from the building, and then using that data to improve the next one. So again, that's all about showing some of the why and a bit about the how, but I think this slide is probably the most important one. It's probably the least exciting one when you look at it. But this is a technology readiness level sort of way of working. It's not invented by Mace. This has been used for decades in many different industries. But it's provided that governance to how we bring innovation in and decide which ones that we're going to really back and get through to be used at scale. It helps us to make clear, intentional investment. It helps us understand what the goals are going to be, so we know how to measure it, and then typically we'll always have a business realisation plan off the back of it. So what it's stopping is a lot of people with good ideas and solutions running around looking for problems. It starts with a problem and then finding the solution that goes with it. Right at the beginning, at the concept stage, we've got the introduction to the innovation funds. So whilst I say we're trying to stop people with solutions looking for problems, that is what we do in stage one, which is we encourage people to come with what they think is an innovative idea. If we can then find a business need for it or a business use for it, they'll get awarded £500 to say thank you very much, and it then goes onto the tracker to decide what we're going to do with it next. And having the idea doesn't mean you have to deliver it. You can have the idea and then hopefully somebody else will then pick it up and then want to deliver it. But as it sort of goes through, we've got the concept stage, so it's the idea, the need, and what the sort of outline concept could look like. It's good for us. That costs us £500 to get that idea in. But if it gets through the first phase, which is it's got some business value, then it starts to get a bit more serious. So we then start to look at a proof of concept, and if we can get it to, if we need to, get a factory test. So then that's not just Mace time, but there's more likely to be an investment cost to it, and it might not be us, it could be with the client, it could be with supply chain. But then that's when we start to look at how do we create a prototype and test it in the real world. Once we get through the next gate, it's then we use it on a part of a project, and then if that's successful, on a whole project, and if that's successful, a load of projects. And that's the develop piece. Again, we're measuring the impact that these innovations have had and the value that it's brought to us and our clients. And once we get through there, it's then into embedment. So it's really understanding what the business or the benefit realisation plan looks like. So that's really for me, that was one of the, when I joined Mace, it's a simple concept, but you can see now how innovation is taken seriously and how people then know what their path to getting to a full-scale solution is. There's nothing more frustrating than not having people listen to you. I suppose one of the things, and I did this in my first month, was to ring every single unsuccessful person in phase one. And for me, that was 50 people, so it was 50 individual phone calls to explain why it wasn't successful in this phase, and here's some tips and ideas on how to make it, or how to resubmit, and hopefully it will be successful. So it's a big investment in time. And then briefly on the innovation fund. So this is where some of the £500 come from, but then also what we invest into the projects that are going through the test phase. We've got the RDEC claim. Does everyone know what RDEC is? So it's So it's the sort of claim that you can get for effectively doing R&D. That's money that comes back. Some of that gets redistributed to the engines. Remember, the engines, they're parts of the business, and part of that then goes into the innovation fund to allow us to reinvest. So that's how we've created that R&D fund. If you remember, I said 3.5% was going to be spent on R&D. This is where a large chunk of it comes from. But also, we're always looking for ways to partner with other organisations. That could be a client, somebody in the supply chain, could be somebody with a great idea. And we've had a lot of success in developing innovations in that way. So I'll briefly run through some of the successes. So here's a real life example of how a product has gone through the innovation process. So right at the beginning it was an idea, and now we've got the low carbon cassettes. They've gone through a number of tests and are being developed on site. Here's an example of how that's accelerating. So the data sheets is basically the products that come together to create a larger product on a project. So it was in November last year, we had 32 of those. It was last month we had 150 data sheets, so you can see we're on an exponential curve. The dashboards that we create, the MEB, our executive board, look at that every quarter. We'll go through it together just to understand where we are and how we're tracking against our innovation fund. So sponsorship right from the very top. There's an example of one of those product guides. This is an example of the benefits, so the benefits realization plan. So it's everything is measured, so that's how we know how well we're doing and if we want to accelerate some and perhaps not others. Some of the things that happened a few years ago are now sort of common practice, so around coordination, issue management, how we're doing that on live projects at the moment. This is quite an interesting one, the digital builders work process, fairly complex, so we're now using that to make sure that's going better. It's helping us with record keeping, records management. Big investment in automating our cost estimation, so I've had some great success there. Carbon assessment, that's becoming increasingly important. Our clients are asking for it, we want to do it because we're measuring against it, but then also looking at our materials and where they are, where they've come from and how they've got to the projects and how they're being used. That will also feed into the golden thread. Looking at I showed you this before, using the tools, how do things get from the factory to on the project. This is quite an interesting one. So record keeping on our projects. So we've got on many of our projects cameras to understand how we're progressing on site. And why this is interesting is it just gives you a different perspective. And I didn't get this till a couple of weeks ago, working with one of our structures directors. And he was able to spot inefficiencies in how we were laying things out on the slab that you could not see when you're there on the slab. It was only when you've got that bird's eye view you can see some really obvious ways that we can improve our productivity. So that's one that I didn't think I was going to be impressed with, but I was. That's one of our projects. I was more focused on this bit, coming from a digital bias, which was how we have that sort of what's going on in real life. We can then compare that with the model, compare that with the 4D model, so we can see is what is there now, what should be there now. So we're getting great value from that. Also doing the same on the inside of the building. This has been super helpful with record keeping again, so working with organisations to help us capture this information, but then we can then run some data and analytics from it, so understanding how we're going with progress. Health and safety teams can use it to see what's going on a project. It helps us with claims as well, so if someone say we're unable to get into an area, we can say, well look, we can show you that you can, or the other way around. It can be, I appreciate, understand it, we can manage that a little bit better. We can also check as-built progress, so this is taking it all the way from design through to construction, then actually have we got all the information and data that we have to hand over at the end, something that's often forgotten. We've got this is something that was built in-house on one of our projects where we've been taking scans of our buildings as it's going up and then comparing that to the model to see where we're out of tolerance. So we've been able to identify issues a lot earlier and then put some remediation in place. This is an example of that control room. As I said, that's been super popular. Here's an example of one that's we sort of learned from it. So it's also important to understand when things aren't great. There's a video with this one. So this was, we used augmented reality to understand tolerances on site during the construction process. I'm sure some of you will recognise the tool that we're using. The issue is not with the tool. The tool works really well, but when you actually try to understand where the benefits are, the return on investment just wasn't there. It took a little while to set up. But we probably could have got the data and the information that we needed quicker and cheaper by not using the tool. So it's as important to understand the ones that aren't working well, understand that early, pivot or turn it off. And then the last one there, that's Dave the dog, used in Heathrow. Everyone gets excited about the dog, the robot, but it's actually the scanner on the top that's the most useful piece, because that's going through our cargo tunnel and doing regular scans. It's got a really complex build. There's high risk. We've only got a small window to get in there and do work. So this just helped us remove a load of issues before the teams get into the tunnel. So I think I'm slightly, I'm just about on time. That leaves us 10 minutes for questions.
Thanks, David. Has anyone got any questions? That was a really good talk. There's one at the back.
Hi, hello. Yeah? Okay. Hi, I just wanted to have a greater understanding a little bit from you in terms of how easily are individual components of it to be replaced. Modular construction is not new. It's been 20 or more even years. Some of the buildings that have been done initially are now coming to the point where they are no longer usable. They have to be dismantled, etc. Because, so that is my question: how to kind of make it long term.
Yeah. So agreed. It's not new. I think the bit that is new is being able to sort of systemize it and do it at scale. We were talking about this recently, and it's been in the context of creating the golden thread. So it's how do we ensure that the right that things are being built in the right way, that they're getting installed in the right way, how they're being maintained in the right way, and then how do we then dismantle it again afterwards, making sure that is thought through right at the beginning, that there's a requirement to do that. So it's making sure that we capture that information, but then still make it available for somebody 20, 30, 40 years down the line. So that's something we're actively working on. I can't tell you how we've done it on those. I don't know myself, but I agree it's an issue, and we're working on how to do that. Because you're right, it's a requirement.
Are there any more questions? I have a question.
Okay.
So in the process of making a building into a sort of Mace constructible product, it's a really interesting approach. The sort of off-site MMC thing is I think sits at this perfect little center point of digital sustainability and MMC. I think it's really interesting. But it seems that there's still, you probably inherit a design from an architect who doesn't appreciate that Mace will be delivering the project.
Yep.
So what's the process in converting just a regular BIM model, presumably, that you inherit into something that's sort of deliverable with the jump factory or within your innovation strategy?
Yeah. No, spot on. So you're right. We're not using this on every project. It doesn't lend itself to all projects currently, although that's changing. Hence, we're creating more and more parts to go into it. However, it comes down to the build strategy really, very early on. So once we get the designs through, the key piece of work is to it sounds silly, but work out how you're going to go build it. And so if you go, if you can then start to deconstruct it, as in understand the design, that's why it's important to have that catalogue of parts there, so you can see how you can build it back together. And I think we need to understand that the reality of it is that when you get design in from a design consultant, we basically start again, because it's not sort of fit to construct to. So what we'll have to do is go speak with our tier 1s and tier 2s and tier 3s and really understand how do we do that, what are the right materials, how do we do it safely. So you end up sort of having to build it back up from the bottom. And it's through that process where you're working with a good, tight supply chain that have also bought into working in this way, that you can then start to rebuild the building. Yeah. Which I know I know everyone wants it to be this like amazing design that makes its way all the way through to construction and just gets built on all the time. But the reality of it is that's not what happens. Yep.
Hi, thank you for the great talk. Just had a quick question about kind of your laser scanning, reality capture, and you had some slides about tolerance and measuring tolerance and virtual reality. What parts of that process have you found kind of particularly effective, and which parts haven't really added much value in that kind of technology?
Yeah,
area?
so my answer is going to be annoying, right? Because it depends, right? So it depends what's going on that project. I think there's been a lot of hype about, especially some like the virtual reality things, about what it can do and how you can use it on when you're on a construction project. But the use cases just don't really stack up. So for our example there, we saw the heat map. That's because the building was complex, and there was a huge amount of mechanical and electrical stuff went into it. With the timescale was like super compressed, so there was just there's no margin for error. So something like that turns into quite a small investment compared to getting to site and then understanding there's a problem when you've got a load of MEP components that have been manufactured miles away, and then you turn up on site and you can't get them installed. So just doing that check pays for itself pretty quickly. So, but again, it will depend on the different projects. I think if you look at our retrofit business or interiors and retrofit business, so we're working with an existing structure. And then when I'm looking at some of the things that we're doing with these existing structures or existing buildings, you have to really understand what you're working with for absolutely myriad of reasons. So there the business case all of a sudden starts to stack up again really quickly. So yeah, I know it's an annoying answer, but I think it really does depend on what your project is and what the issues are.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Any more questions? We've got a few minutes still, so.
Just a question really about the big panels you were showing and your confidence that you're moving very rapidly in terms of years in developing these panels and fitting them. You want them to last for 100 years. So how do you actually, what's your confidence levels in the interfaces you're creating with these large panels?
So I'll more of a philosophical response first. I'm not sure that all I don't know what that building is how long that's supposed to last, but I don't think all buildings are expected to last 100 years anymore. I think the question around how things are going to be sort of modified and changed and removed, I think that's probably quite interesting, and that's why I quite liked your question, because I think that's going to become more and more relevant. And again, if you look at what's going on in the market with retrofit, I think that the world is changing. But to answer your question, I probably can't answer the question, so because I'm not a facades man and I don't know how it's been done. But I assume that there's been we saw factory testing. So everything that as we go through the stages of the technical readiness level, I think at stage 5 is a factory test. So I would assume a factory test is what we'd expect from a factory test, that would go and test those types of things, but I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you. I think there was a question just next door to you.
Just another quick one. With modular construction, when you have a project and there is usually a high demand for these sort of factory-oriented thing, you have to employ people, I understand, for that particular project, for that particular type of construction, what you're designing for preparing, etc. And then subsequently, when the project finishes or becomes not viable, how do you sort of, what's your sort of skills training program that you have in place for these people, and how do you ensure that they are retained in their employment positions to continue sort of?
Yeah. Okay, so good question. I'll look at it from a Mace perspective. I've got some opinions from my time in Saudi as well. But from a Mace perspective, we're a management company, so we're not putting people to work. So we're putting a supply chain. We're putting tier 1, tier 2, tier 1 to work, and then we're putting the tiers underneath them to work. But that level that we work with, that supply chain. For example, yesterday I was at the Mace Business School. So in the Mace Business School is where our supply chain come in, and we give them training on many things. Right. So yesterday was one of those. So we had a number of people in the room. We went through things like competence, the Building Safety Act, many different topics, and then had some time afterwards in a more sort of social environment to discuss some of the issues exactly like that. So that's how we do it. We've got the Mace Business School, and so we've got a formal way to go and address those things. But we're a management company, so we're not putting the people to work. We're helping those organisations ensure that they've got the right skills to go do that work.
Thank you. Is there any more?
Hi. I've worked on some projects before, and there were like long corridor of MEP services, like modular, that you can apply your designs on it. But there are also some cases, like on projects, where every section is different on the floor.
Yep.
So, like, to what extent, or like, what are your thought process on like what percentage of like modular MEP you're going to put into a building when you're designing?
Yeah. So here's the issue with me going through these slides. I'm not a modular expert. I'm a digital dude, right? But here's what I can tell you. So it comes back to that build strategy. So how are we going to construct that building? One of the first things we look at is how do we standardise stuff? Is there a way to remove a lot of those issues through better design or better procurement or whatever it's going to be? So we'd be typically looking to eliminate that, so that then allows us to go do a much more productive way of working. There are always cases where you're not able to do that, so we might have to do a hybrid of the two, and there's some projects that we don't use these techniques at all. So yeah, so it depends. And this is where the value in the supply chain comes in. We've got some like specialist companies that we work with, and this is what they do all day, every day, is try and find solutions to that. Yeah.
I think that's all we have time for, so thank you, David.
Thank you. I'll rip through that. Thank you.